You're with Julian on the Brown Note, and I'm going to start my stopwatch going. And a review of the Cure album, Songs of a Lost World. I normally do not do album reviews on this show because I end up talking for 20 minutes, so I've got a stopwatch going right now. So I shut up. So the 14th studio album by The Cure is one of those records that gets heralded as a great return to form. Most probably represented by David Bowie's Black Star album, but no one can touch what happened surrounding the Black Star album. I'll say this is every bit as morose and reflective on death, morality, passage of time, lost love, everything that was dark about Black Star, perhaps much more despairingly is the case on the 14th studio album by The Cure, Songs of a Lost World. Now, The Cure emerged as one of the holy trinity of indie. In truth, they emerged alongside a raft of iconic all-time great UK bands that appeared at the post-punk sort of tail end of 1978, 79, including the likes of Simple Minds and U2, who would then morph into not indie at all, but stadium rock acts. But the holy trinity of British indie music and global indie music, even decades later, The Smiths, The Cure and New Order, with a number of satellite acts. And like all three of those bands, the only one good enough to die young and leave a good-looking corpse was The Smiths. But with all of those bands, including Simple Minds and U2, when I've had them at their 10 out of 10 best, I just don't care for them at their 7 out of 10. So pretty much identically with The Cure, I ended my association with New Order product around the same time as Wish and I can't even remember what that last New Order album I got was. But the last two albums that I significantly listened to from both bands were New Order's Technique and Disintegration by The Cure. High watermarks, not only on their discographies, but on anyone's. Two magnificent albums, and nothing that followed was that interesting to me. And I would rather go and see Peter Hooked and the Light than New Order these days. I don't care for hearing them as a mid-band. And it's been the same with The Cure. I've not really bothered listening, but one big difference, I guess, is the fact they haven't recorded a studio album for 16 years. So this one has been a big, momentous event, given that it is one of the most acclaimed albums of the year. I'll get the track list up. I've already wasted 3 minutes. I didn't care for the opener alone when I first heard it. I found it boring. I found the meandering minutes of the intro, something which happens a lot on this album, to be rather unfulfilling. And when the vocal arrived, it was very overwrought and actually quite good. Lyrics about birds falling out of the sky, the opening lyric being, "This is the end. We toast the bitter dregs to our emptiness." It's dark stuff. One thing that and it reminded me a lot of Plainsong, the grandiose opener, synth-bathed opener to Disintegration. This pulls a similar trick. The number one thing that stood out of the gate on this album is it is one of the most horrendously produced and mixed albums by an act of their stature that I have ever heard. So the mix throughout the album, which works really well on tracks where they don't have strings and synths on, is far too dense. It's mixed horribly, but the gated drum sounds, I don't know what it is with older acts. So it's like traveling Wilburys syndrome, where someone tells them that this gated drum sound actually sounds good. It doesn't. It sounds awful. And for veterans of very textural music, I find it odd that such a long gestating project as this could actually have such bad production. Did no one in the studio say how awful this sounds? And the synths as well really do remind me of Moby, sort of Play era. That said, it's a much better opener and signifier of what's to come than the standalone single that we got. It does lead into the album, and it does represent the album really well, and I'm actually growing a lot on it. One musical signifier throughout the album is these really gorgeous plinking pianos and keys, which add these little motifs in the background of songs and are often the high point. And there's also this really weird spectral motif as well that's quite gorgeous. It's a very good scene setter. And the next two tracks aren't, for an album this good, it sounds like I'm going to really destroy it. The second track, And Nothing Is Forever, it's a few of the tracks, particularly when they're using pianos, do remind me a lot of Sigur Ros's music, particularly around the era of Tack. It's a more hopeful sort of string section, but it meanders, and it's the worst track on the album, I think. The strings are sort of kind of hopeful, but the mix works against these kind of songs. It's a very middling track. 3 on an album with only 8 songs, because they're very long. A Fragile Thing is a lot more sort of driving. I thought when it's just the bass drums and guitar, the mix that they've gone for is it allows the music to breathe a lot better. It does work better. And they also cull that 2-minute intro time. The first 2 tracks approach 7 minutes, and you could argue that the second one doesn't really need to be anywhere near that. It's a more immediate and dramatic track. From then on, from track 4 to track 8, the remaining 5 tracks are uniformly excellent. They do a really well-chosen stylistic choice for tracks 4 and 5. And that is, instead of doubling down on this very sort of funeral-paced music, they go hell for leather into the sort of pornography era, angry, violent, guitar-driven music that they did around that album Pornography, which is still a high point, I think, from 1982. Almost industrial, and they allow for wailing guitars on some of these tracks, particularly this one. And that they reminded me of Guns N' Roses. Like full-blown hard rock wailing guitars. I thought it was a very good. No Way for Us to Find Peace. I wonder, listening to this music, about Robert Smith's wife. I think he's been married for decades. What must she think when he writes virtually only about relationships from such a dark place? No Way for Us to Find Peace. And the song's called War Song, with the war being relationships. And it's terrific. It's absolutely fantastic, as is the follower, Drone No Drone, which is even more industrial. And these 2 tracks, they use an overdriven bass on a lot of this album, but it really comes to its fore. The riff for this song, Drone No Drone, is absolutely fantastic. Got a sort of 90s alt-rock vibe. Still got a long intro, even though it's only... even on a 4-minute 45 song, it's still got a 2-minute intro, which is... it works better here, though. And the plinky keys, fantastic stuff. The track I Can Never Say Goodbye is arresting, though probably the least interesting of this run of songs. It's still very, very nice, and All I Ever Am is magnificent. Again, a 90s sort of alt-rock, overdriven bass riff, and the drums actually sound good. It does this tattooing tom-tom sort of thing rather than these huge, big, gated snares, which is one of my least favourite sounds in music. And again, toms for a Titanic opener. I think the parallels between this album and Disintegration are kind of deliberate, when Disintegration opened with Plain Song and this closes with End Song. And it is dark and majestic, and it would have been a very welcome song on Disintegration, as would I think War Song and Drone No Drone. It's magnificent, and the vocals and the lyrics are sublime. I'm outside in the dark, wondering how I got so old. And he sounds like he means it. I really want to single out Robert Smith as a vocalist. He, alongside Bernard Sumner of New Order, was regarded as one of the non-singers to have emerged in music. I think that does him very big discredit because he's one of the greatest vocalists of all time. And I say that given that everything I like about Bernard Sumner's New Order vocals are his complete detachment, his, you know, it's like he just doesn't care. And he's iconic in the way that he voices his songs. But Robert Smith is up there with Kate Bush as one of the most expressive, actorly voices in all music. And he goes hell for leather, wailing in despair on this album. I mean, his vocal performances on something like Disintegration or Pornography were fantastic. Here, he's really exploring a lot of areas of despair and hopelessness about aging and love and the passage of time and death. And he really embodies it as an actor. So I thought that was a very, very strong album overall. And I just pray that Robert Smith sees sense and issues this album in a different mix. But because of its strengths, particularly through, I would say now, 6 tracks on the album, which are outstanding, I would give it a 9 out of 10 for The Cure and Songs of a Lost World, a title that I was guaranteed to get slightly wrong one way or another.